They say that for every good person in the world, there is an equally evil one. Today, you're joining Top 10 Archive on a bloody journey through the 20th century. The 10 individuals you are about to see had no regard for human life, killing dozens of innocent people just to fill their own twisted desires. The following is a list of the top 10 serial killers active between 1900 and today. Mass murderers are exempted, and this list is compiled by looking at only the proven number of murders in the killer's spree. Number 10. Gary Ridgway, active 1982 to 2001. During the span of 1982 through 2001, Washington State was a blood-soaked playground for former Vietnam vet Gary Ridgway. Although it would be easy to blame the war for Ridgway's disturbing nature, even as a young boy there was evil brewing inside him. At the age of 16, Gary stabbed a 6-year-old boy in the liver. While laughing, he stated, "I always wondered what it would be like to kill someone." Though the boy lived, Gary got his first taste for blood. In 1982, Ridgway began a spree of murders that threw the state of Washington into panic, starting with Wendy Lee Caulfield. Ridgway was dubbed the Green River Killer for having dumped his victims in areas surrounding the Green River. He was known to target teenage runaways and prostitutes, usually killing them by strangulation. Even after death, Ridgway showed no remorse for his victims' bodies, as he often revisited the site to have sex with them. On November 30, 2001, the Green River Killer was picked up after DNA evidence linked him to the string of murders. In order to retrieve his victims' bodies, the prosecuting attorney, Norm Mailing, offered Ridgway a plea bargain for life in prison without parole instead of the death penalty. The actual count of victims is unknown, as even Ridgway himself claims to have killed so many that he lost count. But the final confirmed number that he was convicted on was 49. Number 9. Anatoly Onoprienko, active 1989 to 1996. A man with a predetermined destiny, or a savage killer worthy of the title The Beast of Ukraine? When one first hears of Anatoly Onoprienko's atrocities, chances are the latter seems a more fitting title. But according to Anatoly, his upbringing in an orphanage was what damned his life. Was it a coincidence then that 8 of Anatoly's 10 murder sprees were families, typically in their home? Starting with his first victims in 1989, whom he murdered after he and an accomplice were caught in the midst of robbing them, Anatoly targeted families, slaughtering them in their own homes with a variety of methods. While his methods of killing changed, Anatoly always followed a pattern of murdering the adult male, working his way down to the children. Typically, he would burn down the house and murder any eyewitnesses. At the age of 37, Anatoly moved in with a relative, a move that would eventually lead to his apprehension after his stash of 122 weapons, including a sawed-off TOZ-34 shotgun, was discovered by his relative. After being convicted of a final count of 52 murders, Anatoly was sentenced to life in prison, where he remained until his death in 2013. Number 8. Andrei Chikatilo, active 1978 to 1990. It was December of 1978 in a small coal mining town near the southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don. The body of 9-year-old Yelena Zokunova was found with lacerations in her skin, indicating foul play. Pegged for the murder was 25-year-old Alexander Krevchenko, who, despite numerous holes in evidence, was convicted and executed for the child's murder. This would give the real murderer, the future butcher of Rostov, a chance to begin a killing spree fueled by sexual release. By September of 1984, Andrei had brutally murdered 15 young girls, leaving their bodies in grotesque displays of savagery. The butcher's reign was threatened when Andrei was picked up for attempting to lure his next victims away from a bus station. Despite being in the very grasp of Soviet police, a difference between Andrei's blood sample and semen samples found on 6 of the victims kept him off the suspect list. Andrei resurfaced again, claiming victims on business trips outside of Rostov, throwing the investigation off its trail. A slip in 1990, when he was observed and questioned by an undercover officer after leaving a woodland area, would be the butcher's last move. When the body of Svetlana Korostik was found in the same woodland area 7 days later, Andrei's name came up. After cross-referencing former employers, officers were able to place Andre in the numerous towns and cities where victims were found. After 53 reported murders, Andre was finally executed on February 14, 1994. Number 7. Abdul Jabbar, active around 1970. When it comes to brutal methods of murder, Abdul Jabbar's means of ending the lives of his victims was amongst one of the most disturbed on this list. Instead of simply slaughtering his prey, Abdul would degrade them by raping them first. In the middle of the act, Jabbar strangled his victims with his turban, eventually killing them for his own twisted pleasures. Though suspected of being the cause for the deaths of over 300 men and boys, Abdul Jabbar would only be convicted of 65 counts of murder after being arrested in the midst of attempting to murder another victim. 2 innocent people were also executed for his crimes. In 1970, the spree would end with the arrest and hanging of Abdul. Number 6. Yang Xinhai, active 2000 to 2003. There's no secret behind just how disturbed a serial killer's mind must be, but when one confesses outright a desire to kill, it sends chills down your spine. The monster killer of China was Yang Xinhai, an introvert with a penchant for sexual assault. After being released from doing 3 years in prison for attempted rape, Yang's murder spree began, claiming the lives of 67 by his arrest in 2003. Yang terrified his victims in their own homes, breaking in with no motive but to murder everyone present. Axes, hammers, shovels. To Yang, these everyday tools became weapons with which to do his bidding. On November 3, 2003, Yang was arrested during a routine inspection of an entertainment venue in Hebei. After being detained, Yang said, "When I killed people, I had a desire. This inspired me to kill more. I don't care whether they deserve to live or not. It is none of my concern. I have no desire to be part of society. Society is not my concern." By February 14, 2004, Yang's fate had been determined, and by the end of the day, he was executed. Number 5. Kampadamar Shankaria, active 1977 to 78. I have murdered in vain. Nobody should become like me. These were the last words spoken by Indian serial murderer Kampadamar Shankaria right before his execution by hanging on May 17, 1979. From 1977 through 1978, he took part in a gruesome spree that had all of the characteristics of a deliberate yet twisted mind. Shankaria took the lives of a reported 70 victims, using the hefty weight of a hammer to brutally beat them to death. Number 4. Pedro Rodriguez Filo, active 1967 through 2003. For some, the urge to kill comes early in life. At least, this was the case for Pedro Rodriguez Filo, a Brazilian man that would later be known as Padrino Matador, or Killer Petey in English. Pedro's life started off dramatically after his father inadvertently injured Pedro's skull after inflicting damage to his mother's womb in a fight. At the age of 13, Pedro attempted to murder his own cousin, shoving the boy into a sugarcane press during an altercation. The boy survived, but it wasn't long before Killer Petey surfaced. At 14, the vice mayor of Alphanes, Minas Gerais, fired Pedro's father on suspicions of stealing food from the school's kitchen. He would be Pedro's first kill, followed shortly by who Pedro suspected of being the real thief. After an arrest in 1973, Pedro would do the remainder of his killing in prison, even murdering his own father, who brutally killed his mother with a machete. With a total of 71 confirmed murders, Pedro was charged with 128 years in prison, but later changed to 400 years after crimes he committed while incarcerated. But he was released only after 34. In 2011, he was picked up again for rioting and false imprisonment. Number 3. Daniel Camargo, active 1974 to 1986. At a young age, Daniel Camargo was subjected to abuse and torture by his stepmother, who often dressed him as a girl and sent him out into the public to be ridiculed. This kind of emotional strain would surely have an impact on a young mind. Daniel's youth was without criminal activity, but when he met and fell in love with a girl named Esperanza, things would make a turn for the worse. Prior to marrying his love, despite a de facto union and 2 kids with another woman, Daniel found out Esperanza was not a virgin. Though he sought to leave her after the revelation, he agreed to stay only if she aided him in finding other virgins for him to drug and rape. They succeeded in 5 rapes until the 5th victim reported their activity. After his release, he returned to Colombia, where, without warning, he would kidnap, rape, and murder a 9-year-old girl, thus starting a spree that took the lives of what was confirmed to be 72 girls. Under the guise of a foreigner searching for a Protestant pastor on the outskirts of town, Camargo targeted lower-class girls, leading them into the woods under the guise of searching for a shortcut before raping and murdering them, either by strangulation or stabbing. In 1989, Camargo received a conviction of 16 years in prison, the maximum sentence allowed in Ecuador. He would only survive 5 of those years, as a cousin of one of his victims would exact revenge on the disturbed rapist. Number 2. Pedro Lopez, active 1969 to 1980. The monster of the Andes, a man that claimed the lives of 110 confirmed victims. Pedro Alonso Lopez, infamous Colombian rapist and serial killer, may have actually had a final death toll of over 300, though the 190 extra victims has never been confirmed. A troubled childhood that included a murdered father, prostitute mother, incestuous relationship with his sister, a caretaker that sodomized him, and an alleged molestation by a teacher, can easily be attributed as reasons contributing to Lopez's psychotic nature. After being arrested for stealing vehicles, Lopez was incarcerated. In prison, he claimed to be subject to sexual assault by brutal gangs, and that he hunted down and murdered each of his rapists. Following his release from prison, young girls became Lopez's prey, with sexual assault and strangulation being his modus operandi. Pedro Lopez's last stint in prison ended in 1998 after being declared sane despite being found insane 4 years earlier. He was released on $50 bail. Not surprisingly, in 2002, Interpol released an APB for his arrest after a new murder was unveiled. To this day, he is still at large. Number 1. Luis Galavito, active 1990s. April 22, 1999, Luis Alfredo Garavito Cabillos is finally taken off the streets, arrested after a spree so devastating that local Colombian media pegged him as the world's worst serial killer. It's not just the number of confirmed lives Cabillos, known as La Bestia or the Beast, has claimed, but also the nature of the murders. 138 young boys tortured, murdered, and raped by one mentally disturbed man. Cabillos targeted peasant children or young boys susceptible to falling for offerings of money or gifts. They would follow him on a long walk that would inevitably tire them out, leaving them no strength to run or fight back when Cabillos started his ritual of raping and torture. He cut the throats of many of his victims, sometimes turning to dismemberment after the deed was done. Cabillos sits in prison today on a sentence of a mere 22 years, a reduction in 30 years thanks to the killer's cooperation in finding the bodies of some of his victims. In 2006, Cabillos conducted a public interview where he stated his intent to start a political career to support and help abused children. For the 138 that he brutally and savagely killed and their families, this would surely be more of a slap in the face than a gesture of good intent. Like these top 10 videos? Subscribe by clicking the annotation here and give our video a like. Have an idea for a future top 10? Leave a comment in the section below.